The end of last week, I started talking about forgiveness. We forgive because God has forgiven us. And forgiveness has something to do with reconciliation, with restoring our relationships with God and with one another. Before we get into how we forgive, let's dig a little deeper into what forgiveness really is. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Monday, November 17th, 2025. We preachers do a great job on the whole of talking about high and lofty ideals and concepts. Where we falter is when it comes to being specific. Either we stop just at the point where we need to apply what Scripture says to our daily living, or else we get so specific that we get way out ahead of what Scripture really teaches. To succeed, we need to navigate between Scylla and Charybdis, between being overly general on the one hand and going too far beyond Scripture on the other. There is no topic I know where the waters are more treacherous than the topic of forgiveness. But we cannot avoid the waters. So with that caveat, let's be about it. Here's what we know so far. God forgives us and forgives us constantly. And unless we want to be complete and total hypocrites, God's forgiveness means we had better be willing to forgive others. Forgiveness has as its goal reconciliation. We need to be reconciled to God, and only God's forgiveness can accomplish that reconciliation. But there's a catch, as we saw in the Lord's Prayer. God requires us to forgive one another as a condition to being able to receive God's forgiveness. Can't forgive? It becomes a major stumbling block in one's relationship to God, as hard as it may be. We also know that forgiveness sets the conditions for restoring an offender. It not only serves to restore the offender's relationship with us, but it also serves to remove the burden of guilt from that person. If you've ever felt guilty for something you said or did to someone else, and that person has returned to you with kind words and forgiveness, you know what it feels like to have a burden removed. As long as the guilt remains, you just can't move on. The sense of guilt and regret act as a lead blanket, weighing you down. It becomes a constant burden that affects everything else, your work, your relationships, even your private time. But when the burden is lifted, it's as though the sun has broken through a gray, overcast sky. So forgiveness has these elements at a minimum. First, it takes seriously that harm has actually taken place. It doesn't seek to ignore the harm or sweep it under the rug. We've all seen that happen, and we know that there are silent grudges still lying just beneath the surface. No, forgiveness takes harm seriously. Second, forgiveness takes seriously the fact that as long as that offense is not dealt with, there will always be a barrier between the offender and the one offended. We call this barrier estrangement. Estrangement can be total and complete, where we literally cut off relationships with one another. Or estrangement can lead to a strained relationship, one where there is polite conversation, but real trust no longer exists. It becomes the proverbial elephant in the room until it's dealt with. Third, forgiveness is all about reconciliation. It is about the way we go about the work of restoring a relationship that has been strained or broken. Simply sweeping things under the rug is the easy way to go, but with it, the wound is always there. Forgiveness is the only sure way to achieve reconciliation. And fourth, forgiveness is also about removing the sense of guilt and shame that an offender may carry and that affects everything in that person's life. Guilt and shame are burdens that literally feel like physical weights. Experiencing forgiveness has the effect of removing the thing that weighs us down. But there's one more important element to forgiveness that we haven't talked about yet, and we need to bring up. Forgiveness is also about letting go of one's own anger at having been wronged. As heavy a burden as guilt is, lingering anger can be an even bigger burden, though we don't recognize it as a burden. But relieving ourselves of that burden for ourselves is just as important as helping someone be relieved of the burden of guilt and shame. And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.